Right. Good afternoon to you all. So we are about to begin the today's lecture. So in the today's lecture, we are going to continue the discussion that we started in the last week. It's about the variance analysis, right? So standard costing. So in the last week, in fact, you did not have the lectures, hence the video recording was uploaded. So in the today's lecture, we are going to continue from where it was stopped. So as you have witnessed, we have discussed the first two variances in the sense the material related variances as well as the labor related variances. So today we are going to start from the total uh, or the what do you call that, the overhead variances, the variable overhead variances and the fixed overhead variances. And thereafter, we'll be moving on to the sales variances as well. It's about the sales price and the sales quantity related variances. And finally, we'll be looking at an operating statement where you may compare the budgeted profit with the actual profit. And that's how we move on today, right? හරි. එතකොට පුතාලා අපි අද දවසේ සාකච්ඡා කරන්න යන්නේ ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් කොස්ටිං ලෙක්චර් එක. එතකොට ගිය සතියේ අපිට ඇත්තටම ලෙක්චර්ස් තිබුණ නැහැ. ඒක හොලිඩේ එකක් නිසා අපි වීඩියෝ රෙකෝඩින් එකක් තමයි දැම්මේ. එතනදී අපි පළවෙනි variances දෙක කතා කරා. material related variances සහ labor related variances. එතකොට දැන් අද අපි කතා කරන්නේ එතන ඉඳලා. එතකොට මුලින්ම බලනවා variable overhead variance, ඊට පස්සේ fixed overhead variance සහ අපි the revenue related variances වලටත් යනවා, right? Okay, so that's our discussion, how our discussion is going to be. So let's get started from the variable overhead variances. So when it comes to the variance, it is basically you'll be looking at the deviation, whether it's a favorable or unfavorable. You'll be looking at the deviation from the standard. So that's what we call the variance. So how much that you have how much you have deviated from the standard. So that's what the variance is about. So අපි variance analysis එකදී basically කරන්නේ මොකක්ද? අපිට යම්කිසි standard එකක් තියෙනවා. අපි ඒ standard එකකින් කොච්චරක් දුරට වෙනස් වෙනවද කියන එක තමයි basically variance analysis එකකින් අපි උත්සාහ කරන්නේ. ඒකට පුතාලා පහුගිය වීඩියෝ එකේ කතා කරන්න ඇති this is for the controlling purposes. So mainly you are using these variances that is for the controlling purposes, right? Okay, so then we may come to the variable overhead variances. So when it comes to this variable overhead variances, like the other variances, so here you can basically divide the variable overhead cost variance into two. So we call the variable overhead expenditure variance, the other one the variable overhead efficiency variance. So you can see that as the term suggests that there can be a deviation from the standard overhead cost, and the actual overhead cost can be different mainly due to two reasons. One is the difference between the expenditure. So the expenditure, what you may have planned, can be different from the actual expenditure. And on the other hand, the efficiency that you have expected may not be the one that you have achieved. So the actual efficiency is different from the planned or the standard efficiency. So depending on that, you would witness, so there's a difference. Okay, good that you asked me to summarize the previous ones. Sorry, Puta. So here, we'll be having like 75. We have to go up to 75 slides, in the sense there are around 30 more slides. So therefore, the time may not permit me to summarize the previous ones. So Sorry, at the moment, I may not be able to do that because the time constraint, right? I'm sorry for that. So you are supposed to refer to that previous materials. You should have referred that participating in the today's session. Uh, when it comes to the variable overhead cost variances, as I discussed, there can be expenditure related variances as well as the efficiency related variances. So before we look at the example, let us see how we are to calculate this total variable overhead cost variance. As I said, it's all about how much that you are deviated from the standard. So hence, when it comes to this total variable overhead cost variance, what you are taking is one aspect is the one input that you would take is the actual variable overhead cost. So that's going to be a starting point. Then you are going to compare that with the standard variable overhead cost. The standard variable overhead cost. The actual variable overhead cost is getting compared with the standard variable overhead cost. So simply putting, so the easiest way that you can get used to this, it's all about comparison with the standard. So here you can put the total variable overhead variance. You can simply take it. It is about the actual overhead. You need not to worry that which comes first, right? There's no standard on that. You can take whatever. So it's simply looking at the difference. So therefore it is actual overhead is what you compare against the standard overhead. So that is what the thing. So when it comes to this standard overhead, we may look at the standard variable overhead cost charged to the production is the, you need to take the variable overhead absorption rate, that is the standard one, and multiply it by the standard hours for the actual production. That is what we call the standard variable overhead, right? තර මෙතන අපි total variable overhead cost එක බලනකොට cost variance එක compute කරනකොට අපි compare කරන්නේ මොකක්ද? Actual variable overhead cost එක අපි compare කරනවා standard variable overhead cost එකත් එක්ක. ඒතර මම කිව්වා variance එකක් කියන්නේ සෑම වෙලාවකම කොච්චරක් අපි deviate වෙනවද කියන එක standard එකෙන්. ඒතර මේ standard variable overhead කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? අපේ actual production එකට කොච්චරක් අවශ්‍ය වෙනවද standard terms වලට අනුව කොච්චරක් අවශ්‍ය වෙනවද කියන එක hours. ගොඩක් වෙලාවට අපි භාවිතා කරන්නේ hours. එතකොට අපි variable overhead absorption rate එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒක standard නැත්නම් budget එක මත base කරලා අපි හදන එක. එතකොට once you multiply it by the standard hours for the actual production, you may be ended up getting the what you call that, the standard variable overhead. And here it shows how you are to calculate the variable overhead. It is simply the budgeted variable overhead cost divided by the budgeted hours. So it's about the absorption rate. So you are used to this since the discussion from the absorption costing. When it comes to the computation of the absorption rate, we always use the budgeted cost divided by the budgeted what do you call that, the allocation base. So here most of the time we are taking the hours, labor hours. ඒතර පුතාලා දන්නවා කොහොමද variable overhead absorption rate එකක් ගන්න එක කරන්න කියලා. එතනදී අපි ගන්නවා budgeted variable overhead cost එක බෙදනවා budgeted hours වලින්. ඒතර ඒක තමයි absorption rate එක. ඊට පස්සේ අපි මොකක්ද කරන්නේ? That it's multiplied by the standard hours for the actual production. ඒතර අපේ standard එකක් තියෙනවා, standard cost card එකක් අපි prepare කරා. ඒතර අපි දන්නවා යම්කිසි task එකකට අපි කොච්චර hours ගාණක් allocate කරනවද කියන එක. යම්කිසි product එකකට කොච්චර hours ගාණක් allocate වෙනවද කියන එක. ඒතර ඒ අනුව if you multiply them by the standard hours for the actual production, you may be getting the standard variable overhead cost. So once you compare the actual with the standard, you may be ended up getting into the variable overhead cost variance, right? So this variable overhead cost is what we are going to subsequently divide into two as the expenditure variance and as the efficiency variance. Because this overhead cost variance basically happen due to two reasons. One is due to the difference in the expenditure that you have planned, and the other thing is the efficiency difference, the actual efficiency versus the standard efficiency, actual expenditure versus the standard expenditure, right? So we are going to subsequently divide that, and we are going to have a in detail attention on these variances. The first, you can look at the broader picture, and then you can go down and see exactly what has caused this particular variance. තර පුළුවන් මේ variance analysis එකේදී මුලින්ම අපිට බලන්න පුළුවන් සමස්ත variance එක. ඊට පස්සේ අපිට control purposes වලට තව දුරටත් ගිහිල්ලා මේක තව දුරටත් බෙදා ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒතර overhead cost variance කියන එක අපිට expenditure variance එක නිසා කොච්චර වෙනසක් ඇති වුණා, efficiency variance එකකින් කොච්චරක් contribute කරනවද මේ total variance එකට කියන කාරණාව බලන්න පුළුවන්. Right? Okay. So now we may refer to this and work out what is the total variable overhead cost variance. So let's look at the total variable overhead cost variance. Right? The question says that below details are related to the Lanka PLC. So let me copy this information and let me take that Excel sheet. So the answers are given, but we may just work the things out and then you can have a complete understanding on that. So here you will need to take the actual overhead. What is the actual overhead cost? It is given 8,350. The actual overhead is 8,350. Then what is the standard overhead? So you need to figure out what is the standard overhead. So what do you mean by this standard overhead? That is for the actual production, how much was the standard variable overhead. So here you can see that there you have 1,155 units being produced, right? 1,155 units being produced. This is your actual production. For that, what is the standard hours? Let's first figure out. අපි මුලින්ම බලමු actual production එකට අපි කොච්චර hours ගාණක් allow කරනවද කියලා. The budgeted information are given. The budgeted variable overhead cost 8,400 per week. Budgeted production unit are 1,200 per week, and budgeted hours to be worked in a week is 40 hours. Right, you are given the budgeted production unit per week as well. And budgeted hours to be worked in a week is 40. So you work 40, and in that you plan for 1,200 units. එතකොට සතියකට පැය 40ක් අපි වැඩ කරනවා. එතකොට ඒක තුල අපි production එක 1200ක් අපේක්ෂා කරනවා. එතකොට අපි product එකට යන hours ගන්න බැලුවොත් hours per unit අපි බැලුවොත් අපිට පුළුවන් මෙතන 1200ක් හදනවා අපි sorry ඒකක 1200ක් හදන්න අපිට පැය 40ක් යනවා. ඒතර අපිට ඒකකයක් හදන්න කොච්චර වගේ වෙලාවක්ද යන්නේ? Per one unit it's 0.033 hours. 0.033ක් වගේ තමයි අපි ඒකකයකට යන්නේ. Right? හරි. එතකොට අපි 1155ක් හදන්න කොච්චරක් ගන්න පුළුවන්ද hours? 1155ක් හදන්න අපිට පුළුවන් මේ 0.033 කියලා අපි ගමු. මේ වගේ ප්‍රමාණයක් hours අපි allocate කරන්න පුළුවන්. Right? 0.033 hours. එතකොට අපිට එනවා standard hours ගන්න. එතකොට standard hour එකට cost එක කීයද? මේක ගන්න කලින් එකත් work out කරගනිමු අපි 1155 and that is into this and this is going to be the hours, right? What hours ගන්න අපිට තියෙනවා. No, they are not given in the examination, Puta. You need not to memorize that. You need to take it with the logic, right? That's what we are going to figure out, right? Okay. So you can see that for the actual production, it takes this much of hours, 38.5. 38.5 hours are being taken, right? Then what we need to know, what is the standard cost per hour. The budgeted variable overhead cost of the production is 8,400 per week, and there you have 8,400 cost for 40 hours. So here you are taking the cost per hour. Cost per hour. So it's 8,400 divided by 40, right? So per unit, it comes per hour, it comes 210. So therefore, if you are to take the standard, this is it. It's 210 multiplied by 38.5. So accordingly, you can see that it's 8,350, the actual overhead cost. The standard overhead cost is 8,085. So if you take this, so here it comes the variance 265. So then what kind of variance is that? Is it a favorable variance or unfavorable variance? This is the standard and this is the actual situation. So if the actual cost is more than the standard cost, obviously it is unfavorable. So it's a unfavorable unit. Unfavorable, yes, very correct. It's unfavorable, right? And here you could see that how I take this, right? උදාහරණ දැක්ක මෙතන මම මේක කොහොමද ගත්තේ කියන එක නේ ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එක. ඒතර මම මේක පොඩ්ඩක් ඔයාලට පෙන්නුවොත් ඒක එක්ස්පෑන්ඩ් කරලා අපි මේක ගත්තේ 210 ඒක තමයි cost per hour multiply කරා 38.5 කියන standard hours ගන්න. ඒක 1155ක් හදන්න අපිට ඉඩ දෙන්නේ පැය 38.5. right? तर මේ actual එකත් මම මේ විදිහට චුට්ටක් ගත්තොත් අපිට work out කරගන්න පුළුවන් නේද? මේකේ පැය කීයක් තියෙනවද? පැයක rate එක කීයක්ද කියන එක අපිට work out කරගන්න පුළුවන්. අපි බලමු මේ විදිහට. right? ඒකට අපි ගත්තොත් actual overhead අපිට cost එක ගියේ 8350ක් නේ. අපි පැය 40ක් වැඩ කරා. ඒ කියන්නේ පැයකට rate එකක් විදිහට work out කරොත් මේක තමයි actual rate එක. तर මෙතන 8350 අපිට ආවේ කොහොමද 208.75ක් තමයි hour එකට pay කරලා තියෙන්නේ. එතන hours 40ක් තියෙනවා. तर දැන් තාලට පේනවා පැහැදිලිවම මේ වගේ variance එකක් එන්න බලපාපු හේතු. right? Now you can clearly see there are two reasons. The one reason is that the expenditure is different. So in fact the actual expenditure is less than the standard one. So therefore, if you consider the expenditure variance, you must witness that there is a favorable variance. Similarly, if you look at the hours per unit, the efficiency, you can see that the actual one is less efficient. So there we have taken 40 hours to perform the job. And here, as per the standard, you should have taken 38.5. So therefore, if you look at the efficiency variance, you may observe a kind of a unfavorable one. So that would be the two reasons. So දැන් පුතාලට හොඳටම පේනවා මෙතන හේතු දෙකක් තියෙනවා මේ වගේ variance එකක් එන්නේ. එකක් expenditure එක වෙනස්, අනිත් එක efficiency එක වෙනස්. Resource usage and the cost. So that is the two reasons. So that is what the total variable overhead variance. Right? Okay. So this is what we discussed. So in fact, you can see that it has been worked out as well. Right. You asked me how that 40 was taken. It was taken like this. If you go to that, here the question says that actual variable overhead cost was 8,350 and actual hours were 40 hours. This 40 is actual hours. So this is standard hours, actual cost, standard cost, right? Okay, that's how we got. And in fact, here it has been worked out, but we have worked that out. So therefore, I think you need not to refer this, right? The same thing is what we have discussed. So to make it my mama, right? Where variable overheads vary with direct labor or machine hours of input, the total variable overhead variance will be due to one or both of the following. So you have witnessed that there was a variance in the variable overhead, and that variance may be due to following two reasons, or maybe that is due to one reason. So the two reasons could be a price variance arising from actual expenditure being different from the budgeted expenditure. The price variance arising from the actual expenditure being different from the budgeted expenditure. So you have witnessed that the actual expenditure can be different from the budgeted expenditure or the standard expenditure. And also the quantity variance arising from the actual direct labor or machine hours of input being different from the standard hours or standard hours. So that is the second reason. Simply putting, the expenditure and the resource. So this is the efficiency and this is the expenditure. These reasons give rise to two subvariances. So depending on this, you can work out two variances, the expenditure variance and the what you call that, the efficiency variance. And then you can even attribute this variance, the total variance, into these two, and you can exercise more control on that. So I told you that the very purpose of this what you call the standard costing or the variance analysis, that is about the control. So therefore you are taking that to the minimum possible level, then you are taking them in the too detailed way, so therefore you can exercise better control over that. දැන් අපි දැක්කා අපි මුළු total variable overhead cost එක තමයි ගණනය කරගත්තේ විතරයි. ඒකට අපි ඒක තව දුරටත් මේක බෙදාගත්තොත් අපිට බලන්න පුළුවන් ඇත්තටම ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ කොතනද කියලා. right? ඒකට ඒ අනුව අපිට හොඳ control එකක් exercise කරන්න පුළුවන්. right? Now we are looking at the subvariances. The variable overhead expenditure variance is calculated as follows. You can see we are taking the actual variable overhead cost has to be taken, and then the budgeted flexed variable overhead cost for the actual hours. Or simply putting, for the actual hours, you need to see what must be the variable cost. So simply putting, variable cost absorbed. Variable cost absorbed. So මෙතන පුතාලා අපි බලන්නේ actual variable overhead cost එක අපි ගන්නවා. එතකොට ඒකත් එක්ක අපි compare කරනවා budgeted flexed variable overhead. සරලව කිව්වොත් variable overhead absorption rate එක අරගෙන actual hours වලට apply කරනවා. එතකොට අපිට එනවා අන්න expenditure එකේ variance. වෙන විදිහකින් කිව්වොත් අපි hours ගාන constant තියාගන්නවා. අපි variable overhead expenditure එකේ වෙන වෙනස තමයි මෙතන බලන්න. ඒක උදාහරණ ගොඩක් පැහැදිලි වෙයි. අපි question එකට ගිහිල්ලා මේක work out කරමු. දැන් අපි ගමු මේක subvariances. Total variable overhead expenditure variance. Right. For expenditure variance එකේ අපිට ගන්න තියෙනවා actual overhead cost. එතකොට actual overhead cost අපි ගමු. cost එක ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඒකෙන් අපි deduct කරමු overhead. සරල විදිහට මම කියන absorbed කියලා. ඔයාලට මේක තේරුම් ගන්න පාසු. overhead absorbed කියලා ගන්නකො මේක variable overhead absorbed. right? ඒතර ඔයාලා දන්නවා absorb කරනවා කිව්ව ගමන් actual hours වලින් තමයි multiply කරන්න ඕන. එතකොට variable overhead absorption rate එක තියෙනවා. ඒක actual hours වලින් multiply කරලා තමයි variable overhead absorb කරන්නේ. ඒක තමයි අපේ expenditure variance. ඒතර අපි බලමු actual overhead cost you have already calculated. How you took that? You took that 208.75 multiplied by 40. ඒක ඔයා 40න් වැඩි කරලා මෙතන ගත්තේ. ඊට පස්සේ මොකක්ද කරේ? එකකින් ඔයා අඩු කරා variable overhead absorbed. How do you take the variable overhead absorbed? You need to take the variable overhead absorption rate. So earlier you worked that out. It was found to be 210. And when it comes to the absorb, you need to multiply it by the actual hours. So ඒක මතක තියාගන්න ලේසියිනේ. එතකොට variable overhead absorb කියලා ගත්තා නම් ඒතර අපි දන්නා absorb කරන්නේ actual basis එකෙන් කියලා. ඒතර ඔයාලට මතක තියාගන්න තියෙන ප්‍රමාණය අඩුයි. මේ විදිහට තමයි අපි variable overhead expenditure variance ගන්න. ඒතර මේක ඔයාලා logically හිතුවොත්, so if you think logically, here there is a simple argument. Here there is a simple argument. So here all what you are interested in knowing the expenditure variance. So in order to know the expenditure variance, you need to keep the cost, sorry, you need to keep the hours constant throughout the formula. So දැන් අපි මෙතන hours අනිවාර්යෙන්ම වෙනස් වෙන්න බෑනේ. So දැන් hours වෙනස් වෙනවා නම් එතකොට එතන තියෙනවනේ efficiency එකේ වෙනසක්. නෑ මෙතන අපිට ඕනේ වෙන් කරලා ගන්න expenditure variance. එතකොට ඒ නිසා අපි actual එක ඒ විදිහටම තියාගන්න. We simply let the what do you call that, the cost to be varied. You can see the actual cost is 208.75 per hour, but the standard one is 210. So then you can see it is only a matter of expenditure variance. Now if you work this out, it's 208.75 into 40. You're going to take it with 210 minus 8,400. Then you can see that there's a variance of 50, right? There's a variance of 50. And is it a favorable one or unfavorable one? Just tell me. බලන්න මේ වෙනස favorable ද unfavorable ද කියලා. It's more or less the common sense that you may have to use. What kind of variance is that? Yeah, it's a favorable one. Yes, very correct, because you can see that the actual cost is less than the expected. So hence it's a favorable one. It's a favorable one. This is how we get. Right. Then what you have to do, variable overhead efficiency variance. Efficiency variance. So how you can take that? You can simply take it. You can start from where you stopped. තාලට නවත්තපු තැනින් පටන් ගන්න පුළුවන්. Actual overhead දැන් අපි යන්නේ අපේ මතක තියාගන්න මෙතන actual ඉඳලා standard වලට යන්නේ. ඒක මාරු වුණාට කමක් නැහැ. එතකොට actual ඉඳලා standard වලට යනවා. එතකොට මෙතන අපි expenditure එකේදී actual overhead වලින් පටන් ගන්න ඔන්න variable overhead absorb දක්වා ආවා. දැන් මම කියනවා ඔයා variable overhead, you can take the variable overhead absorbed minus the standard overhead. Standard overhead. ඔකට තමයි යන්නේ. එතකොට සරලවම හිතුවොත් මේ අවස්ථාවේදී අපේ වෙනස් වෙන්න පුළුවන් සාධකයේ තමයි cost එක නෙමෙයි මොකක්ද hours ගන්න. මොකද අපි බලන්නේ efficiency එක. එහෙනම් ඔයා නැවතුනේ variable overhead absorb. So in that you took 210 hours. Sorry, 210 per hour into 40. then you can deduct the standard overhead. How much the standard overhead? As per the standard, how many hours that you allow for the task? It is 38, right? And the cost is 210 and it is 38.5. That is the standard what you would take. So in that, simply what has happened, you can see that expenditure remains the same, but the hours vary. So therefore, this is due to the difference comes as a matter of hourly variance. 210 into 40 minus 210 into 38.5. Then you can see what is that? There's a difference comes 305.15. Is it a favorable one or an unfavorable one? Well, like favorable, unfavorable. Why hours change? Yeah, good. So the hours change because we are looking at the efficiency, isn't it? We are looking at the efficiency. So that's a simple point. Earlier we look at the expenditure variance. So the expenditure varies, hours remain constant. Now hours vary, the expenditure remains constant. That's a simple logic. Yes, you are very correct. It's unfavorable. Why is that? The obvious reason is that you can see the variable overhead here, this 40. This 210 remains the same. This is the hours that you have budgeted, right? Sorry, these are hours that you have actually taken, 40 hours. But as per the standard, how much you should have taken for this task? You should have taken only 38.5 hours. මේ වැඩේට ඔයා අරගත යුතු තිබුණේ පැය 38.5. නමුත් ඇත්තටම ඔයා මේ වැඩේට පැය 40ක් ගත්තා. එහෙනම් ඔයා inefficient because you have used the resources more than what it should be. So the efficiency is all about the minimum resources, the maximum result. So here you have used more resources. Hence it is unfavorable. Now you can see the variable overhead efficiency variance, variable overhead. First you take the variable overhead expenditure variance. How much is that? It's a 15 favorable one. Now you have the variable overhead efficiency variance. It's 315 unfavorable. So once you consider that, the unfavorable is the greatest. So therefore, eventually it's 315. It's 315 minus 50. It's 265. It is unfair. So in fact, this is what you got earlier. මුලින්ම ගත්තේ ඔය කියන 265 තමයි අපි ඔන්න analyze කරේ. So therefore, if you are to exercise control, you can see that you are perfectly fine with the amount what you pay. So nothing to do in terms of the expenditure because you are doing quite well. It's a favorable. But when it comes to efficiency, you need to improve your efficiency. So therefore, when it comes to the management, so they must think about the ways to improve the efficiency. So this is what the insights that it would offer you from the variance analysis. Variance analysis එකෙන් පෙන්නවා මෙතන අපේ ප්‍රශ්නේ තියෙන්නේ expenditure වල නෙමෙයි අපේ expenditure okay ඒක control සහ ඒක favorable ඇත්තටම නමුත් efficiency එක අපි තව පොඩ්ඩක් improve කරගන්න ඕනේ. standard එකට වඩා අපි පොඩ්ඩක් වෙනස් වෙනවා. So we need to do something to improve the efficiency. Right? So that is the insight that it would. So in case of the examination, I told you that you are not given the formula. So therefore, you need to remember that in a logical way. So what is the logical way? When it comes to a kind of a variance, it's all about the actual versus the standard. So that was the starting point. that is variance එකක් කිව්ව ගමන් පුතා අපි දැනගන්න ඕන ප්‍රධානම කාරණාව actual එක තමයි අපි standard එකත් එක්ක compare කරන්නේ. ඒතකොට ඒ අනුව ඒකේ standard actual එක වෙනස් නම් standard එකට වඩා වියදමක් නම් වැඩි නම් ඒක unfavorable වෙනවා. ඊට පස්සේ මේක අපි subdivide කරද්දී අපි එන්නේ මෙන්න මේ වගේ approach එකකින්. You start with the actual or the standard maybe, right? So here I have taken actual. So you start with the actual, then you come to the standard. And that is the way you are coming in, right? Controlling part. Yeah, it's a control, yes. So if I'm correctly taking your question, the variable overhead comes under the controlling. So when it comes to the management function, it helps you with the controlling. Yeah. So here, when it comes to the variable overhead expenditure, you have kept the, what do you call that, the hours constant, actual hours, then the actual expenditure and standard expenditure varies. Similarly, when it comes to the efficiency, you could see that the actual, the standard, what do you call that, the standard cost per hour remains same, but the actual hours and the standard hours was different. So that's how you work out the efficiency. So likewise, you need to make it pretty simplified, and then only it will help you with the with how to remember that, right? Hope that is clear. If you have any question, you can ask. So in the slides itself, but the answer was worked out, but here we have worked them out, so therefore no point of referring them again, right? The same thing is there. So here sometimes you may get confused with the terminologies what is being used, but need not to worry, I have helped you with simplifying them. So here the variable overhead expenditure, the actual variable overhead is there, you are quite okay with that. When it comes to the budgeted flexed variable overhead cost for the actual hours, I gave you a simple word. What is that? Overhead cost absorbed. Overhead cost absorbed. So overhead cost absorbed කිව්ව ගමන් ඔයා දන්නවා variable overhead absorption rate එක තියෙනවා actual hours වලින් multiply කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා. ඒතර ඔයාට මේ ටික මතක තියාගන්න අවශ්‍යතාවයක් නැහැ. Right? Similarly, when it comes to the variable overhead efficiency variance, so it's about the actual hours was multiplied by the standard variable overhead as we took, then the standard variable overhead multiplied by the standard hours. So ඒ දෙක තමයි අපි ගන්න. Right? If variable overheads vary with the direct labor hours, the causes of variable overhead efficiency variance are identical to the causes of labor efficiency variance mentioned earlier. So here, the underlying factor is the hours. So therefore, if something to do with the efficiency, it is exactly related to the direct labor variances as well. Direct labor variances as well. If variable overheads vary with the direct labor hours, causes of the variable overhead efficiency variance are identical to the causes of labor efficiency variances. So අපේ variance එකේ in efficiency වල ප්‍රශ්නයක් විදිහට නම් so ඒ reason ඇත්තටම labor efficiency වලටත් labor efficiency variance ගණනය කරනකොටත් ඒ ටික තියෙන්න ඕනේ. So standard labor is different from the actual labor. So therefore, that's what the point they are making. Apart from the fact that the standard variable overhead rate is used instead of the wage rate. Right, this is how it was calculated, and we have done that. Yes, that's about the variable overhead. So if you have any question on that, yes, you can ask it. If you're not convinced with any, you can question. So I think I have put it in a simple way, so you could see the whole picture there. Okay, so even in the middle of the lecture, if you feel it's problematic, then you can uh, take them, right? Right, now we are moving on to the next variance, what we expect to discuss. It's about the fixed overhead variance. So far we discussed about the variable overhead variance. Now we are moving on to the fixed overhead variance. So like you witnessed earlier, you can see that the fixed overhead variance, we can calculate the variance at once. The fixed overhead variance can be calculated at once. So as we used to do, it's always the actual fixed overhead cost minus or the versus the standard fixed overhead cost. The same way. එතකොට මෙතනත් පුතාලා fixed overhead cost එක ගන්න කරනවා නම් එතකොට variance එකක් කියන්නේ සෑම වෙලාවකම standard එක කොච්චරක් actual වලින් වෙනස් වෙනවා. එහෙනම් ඔයා actual fixed overhead cost ගන්න standard fixed overhead cost gonna take the variance, and that is the overhead cost variance. But that does not provide enough insights. You really need to know what is the root cause. So therefore, it is recommended to dig further and look at the subvariance. Like you witnessed in the earlier case, the variable overhead variance can be caused due to expenditure variance as well as the efficiency variance. Here also, the total fixed overhead cost variance can be caused by the expenditure variance as well as the volume variance. So these are the two underlying reasons for this overhead total cost variance. And if you go further, this fixed overhead volume can further what do you call that, dig deeper, and you can even calculate two more ratios. Total fixed overhead cost කියන එක basically අපිට කඩා ගන්න පුළුවන් දෙකට expenditure සහ volume variance කියලා. ඒතර අපි තවදුරටත් හිතුවොත් මේ volume variance එක අවශ්‍ය නම් අපිට තවදුරටත් කඩා ගන්න පුළුවන් fixed overhead capacity usage variance සහ fixed overhead volume efficiency variance කියලා. ඒතර ඔයාලට ගන්න පුළුවන් insights තවත් වැඩි. ඔයා මේක ඇතුළටම ගිහිල්ලා මේකේ තියෙන root causes හොයා ගන්නවා. එතකොට ඔයාලට ඒක address කරන්න ලේසි. So that is the very purpose over here, right? So the expenditure variance, the fixed overhead that you have planned can be different from the actual fixed cost. So it is possible. And also the capacity what you have planned can be different from the actual capacity. You would have planned for say 10,000 units, but at the end you would have ended up producing 8,000 units. So the volume can be different. So due to that, there can be a fixed overhead cost related variance, right? So that is about the overhead variances, the expenditure variance versus the overhead volume variance. And the volume variance can further divided to two categories. It's capacity usage and volume efficiency. So we'll be looking at later. The first we may focus on the first three ratios. Sorry, first three variances. You're given an example. Before we looked into the example, let us go and see what about the fixed overhead cost variance. So it says that it's about the actual fixed overhead cost minus this standard fixed overhead cost. When you come to the standard fixed overhead cost, you can take the fixed overhead absorption rate into the standard hours. This is about the standard, right? It's about the standard, so therefore it is into the standard hours. And that is what compare against the actual fixed overhead. Okay. So with that understanding, we may go and apply that. Sorry. Happy understanding gila workout kala බලමු පුතාලා මේක. Right, we can take that the fixed overhead cost variance. So try to keep it simple. Just take the actual fixed cost, fixed overhead, minus standard fixed overhead. Right. How do you take the actual fixed overhead? So it would have given in the question. So the question might say that actual production is said and the actual fixed cost 1,900. So you can easily take that, but I recommend to take it in a more elaborative way, in the sense what you can do here, you are given the hours, no? So actual hours you work 38. So therefore, if you apply a kind of a hourly rate, so the whole cost is 1,900, and there you spent 38 actual hours. In the sense, if you take the hourly rate, it comes as 50. So therefore, if I'm to take it, it's 50 per hour into 38. So this will help me to identify the variances, right? So මෙතන actual overhead එක දීලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට ඒක මම ඔන්න attribute කරා hours වලට. දැන් labor hours යන්නේ. labor hours වලට මම attribute කරපුවාම actual hours 38 තිබ්බා කියන්නේ. So if this is the actual fixed cost, මේක actual fixed cost එක මේක අපි ගත්තොත් actual hours වලින් බෙදලා take the actual hours, तर අපිට එනවා මෙතන cost per hour, the actual cost per hour කියන කාරණාවට හොයාගන්න පුළුවන්. तर අපිට බැලුවොත් ඒක compare කරලා standard එකත් එක්ක කොහොමද standard එක කියන්නේ? It says that the fixed cost, it is 100,000 budgeted. The hours, budgeted hours to be worked in a week is 40 hours, and that is for 50 weeks. Here it's a per annum situation, so therefore you need to consider the per annum situation. So this is the annual hours, so therefore standard or the budgeted cost per hour. The budgeted cost per hour comes as, or it's simply, yeah, that is how much it is 50. Then for this actual production, so there you have 900 units. Then for 900 units, how many hours that you can allow for 900 units? So what is the standard hours? That is what we need to figure out. So පුතාලා අපි මෙතන cost එක හොයාගත්තා. ඒ විදිහටම අපිට ඕන දැන් per unit එකකට budgeted hours කොච්චරක් දෙනවද කියලා. එතකොට budgeted annual production 50,000, budgeted hours, that 14 to 50, it is 2,000. එතකොට අපිට බලා ගන්න පුළුවන් per unit එකකට hours කීයද කියලා. So the units, 50,000 units are there. Hours 14 to 20, sorry, 14 to 50, 2,000 hours. Hours are there, and here we have the production units, right? Budgeted units. So therefore, if you divide by the hours by unit, there it comes. Hours getting divided by units, there it comes how many hours. So this much of hours per unit. ඉන්දේශම් 0.4ක් තමයි allow කරන්නේ නේ. ඒතර අපි බැලුවොත් 900කට කීයක් allow කරනවද කියලා. It's 900 into 0.04. 36 hours allow කරනවා. Right. How come 2000? Okay. So this is it. So here you are given the annual fixed budgeted fixed overhead per annum. This is the annual cost, no? Budgeted cost per annum. So here then you must compare that with the same basis, no? If it is per annum cost, then here you can see budgeted hours to be worked in a week is 40 hours, and that is for 50 weeks. If you multiply the 40 by 50, it's 2000 hours per annum. Hours per annum. You take it's 40 into 50. Yeah. So hope you are clear. So accordingly, if you look at for this actual production, you are only allowed 36 hours at a rate of 50. At a rate of 50. So here it seems that it is 50 into 36. 50 into 36. So if you work out that 50 into 36, it's 1800. Then you can see that there's a difference of 100. And what do you think? Is it a favorable or unfavorable? The difference. What kind of difference is that? Is it a favorable one or an unfavorable one? Yeah, it's a unfavorable one. 15 to 36, is it 2000? Is that so? No, 15 to 36, it is 1800. No? So how do you take that 2000? Right, okay. Okay, unfavorable. Okay, good. It's a question earlier. Right. So here, yes, you are very correct. The actual cost is more than the standard cost. So it's a unfavorable one. Very correct. It's unfavorable cost. Right. Now what you can do, if you wish, you can dig them further. Right. And then let's look at that. So having identified the total cost variance, so this is it. Then you can look at the fixed overhead expenditure variance. The fixed expenditure variance, how do you take? It is about the actual fixed overhead minus the budgeted fixed overhead. That is how we take the fixed overhead expenditure variance. So let us work that out. Fixed overhead expenditure variance. We start with the actual fixed cost. Compare it with the budgeted fixed cost. So this is how we calculate the expenditure variance when it comes to the fixed overhead. Actual එක budgeted එකත් එක්ක තමයි පුතා අපි compare කරන්න ඕන. නමුත් කලින් අවස්ථාවේ පුතාලා දකින්න ඇති expenditure variance එක ගන්න එකේ අපි variable overhead absorbed. නමුත් මෙතන අපි budgeted fixed overhead budgeted fixed cost එකත් එක්ක තමයි compare කරන්න ඕන, right? So when you take the actual one, you can see that it is simply the 50 into 38. 50 into 38. Then the budgeted one, how do you take? The budgeted fixed cost is how much? You have planned 40 hours per week, and you know per hour rate, and that rate is budgeted cost per hour is 50. So therefore it is 50 into 40. This is what you have planned. You have planned for 40 hours, but actually you had worked 38. That's the situation. So there it comes, 15 to 38, 1900, 15 to 40, 2000. And you can see that there's a difference of 100. What do you think? Is it a favorable one or unfavorable one? ඒක favorable ද unfavorable ද? Yeah, it's a favorable one. Is that? Why is that? How it is a favorable? Expenditure. Yes, yes, you are correct, because the actual fixed cost is less than the budgeted fixed cost. No, so you have thought of taking this actual fixed cost is 1,900, but you have budgeted that for 2,000. Yes, very correct. You are correct. It's favorable. Good. Then you can look at the volume variance. The volume variance. Volume variance. When you come to the volume variance, you are going to start with where you stopped. It's at the budgeted fixed cost. Budgeted fixed cost වලින් තමයි අපි අතන කලින් නැවතුනේ. එතනින් අපි යන්න ඕන දැන් standard fixed cost එකට. Standard fixed cost. So when you come to that, the budgeted fixed cost, how it comes, it's 50 multiplied by 40. When it comes to standard fixed cost, for this task, in order to produce 900 units, they have allowed only 36 hours. 36 hours. And the rate, the budgeted cost per unit or the overhead absorption rate was 50. 15 to 36. That is the standard. So even we have taken earlier, right? So when you come to that, you can see that it's 15 to 40, 2,000, and 15 to 36, it's 1,800. So altogether, you can see that it's going to be 200 difference. So the question is whether it's a favorable one or unfavorable one. What do you think? When it comes to volume, it's a favorable. Is that? What kind of variance is that? It's a unfavorable variance. Yes, it's 2,200 is an unfavorable variance. Very correct. So here the budgeted, so there you have planned to work 40 hours. There you have planned to work 40 hours, and you have targeted for a kind of output of per hour output. If you divide this 100,000 units, 100,000, so 50,000 units is what you have planned. අවුරුද්දට 50,000ක් plan කරලා තියෙනවා. සති 50යි තියෙන. ඒ කියන්නේ සතියකට ඔයා 1000ක් plan කරලා තියෙනවා. හැබැයි ඔයා හදලා තියෙන්නේ actually 900 unit. ඒතකොට ඔයා 900 unit හදපු නිසා තමයි ඔයාගේ standard එක 36 වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. හැබැයි ඔයා plan කරා කීයකටද? hours 40කට plan කරා. සතියට hours 40ක් වැඩ කරමු කියලා plan කරා. නමුත් standard එකට අනුව ඔයා 36යි වැඩ කරන්නේ. ඒතකොට ඒ කියන්නේ ඔයාගේ volume එක use කිරීම සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඔයා efficient නැහැ. So therefore it's unfavorable. That's how it become unfavorable, right? So you must make a perfect sense out of that, right? That's how it has become unfavorable. Unfavorable. Got that? Good. Right here, now you can see we have look at the fixed cost, fixed overhead variances. We have looked at the fixed overhead variances. Overhead variance. It comes fixed overhead cost variance. It came as a matter of expenditure variance and variance plus the volume variance. ඒක එතකොට මේ විදිහට තමයි අපිට මේ variances දෙක ආවේ. expenditure variance එක අපිට දැක්කා 100 favorable තිබුණා. එතකොට අපි ගත්තොත් volume variance එක 200 unfavorable තිබුණා. එන අවසාන වශයෙන් බැලුවොත් අපිට ඉතුරු වෙනවා 100 favorable 100 unfavorable. මේක coincide වෙන්න ඕනේ. That must be equal to what you had figured out first. So ඔයා දැක්කා fixed overhead cost variance එකක් ඔයා එක තව දුරටත් ගිහින් විශ්ලේෂණය කරා. Then you saw that it is nothing to do with the expenditure. So in terms of expenditure, it is less than the budget. So therefore, it's good. But at the same time, if you look at the using of the capacity or the volume, so you have planned for 40 hours, but eventually you have done a work equivalent to 36 hours. So in that sense, you are not good. It's unfavorable. So therefore, you need to think about improving the work time. How to get 36 years? Good. So this 36, how it comes with this is about the standard fixed cost. The standard fixed cost mean for the actual production, how much hours that must be allowed. So the actual production is 900 units. If your actual production is 900 units, earlier we worked out how many hours to be allowed as per the standard. And that must be 36 hours. 36 hours. එතකොට ඒකක 900ක් හදන්න ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එකට අනුව කොච්චරක් ඉඩ දෙන්න ඕනද? පැය 36ක්. එතකොට the absorption rate is 50. We worked out that, or 50 into 36 is 1800. That's how we even earlier we have taken that. This fixed cost total variance. So last one same as fixed cost total variance. No. So the fixed cost, the answer is same. I didn't get you, I think. Last one is equal, same as a fixed cost total variance. Last one in the sense, is it expenditure variance equal to the fixed overhead cost variance? That's what you are referring to? How you get 38? Okay. Yeah, 38, how we get, it's the actual Buddha. So here you can see actual production 900, and the question says that the actual hours were 38 hours. So this is the actual scenario, actual hours. Hope you get that. The expenditure variance is different from, it's true that the answers is correct, but you can clearly see that here we have 38, here we have 36, here we have 40. Actual fixed cost minus the budgeted fixed cost. Here we are taking the standard fixed cost. Budgeted fixed cost in the sense that is the number of units that you have budget. So here in this question, if you take, you can see annually we have planned for 50,000 units. So it is for 50 weeks. So therefore per week you have budgeted 1,000 units. That is the budget. But the standard mean for the actual production, how many hours must be there. So the actual production is 900. Then in standard terms, how many hours that you must allow. So therefore standard is different from the budgeted fixed cost. So that's what you need to understand. තරුවත මේ කාරණා හොඳට පැහැදිලි කරගන්න ඕනේ. budgeted fixed cost එක සහ standard fixed cost එක කියන්නේ දෙකක්. budget එක කියන්නේ අපි කොච්චරක් plan කරනවද කියන එක initially. ඒතර මෙතන පුතාලට පේනවා අවුරුද්දට අපි 50000ක් units plan කරනවා. ඒතර 50000ක් unit plan කරනවා කියන්නේ අවුරුද්දට නම් සති 50ක් වැඩ කරනවා නම් සතියකට ඒකක 1000ක් අපි plan කරනවා. ඒතර ඒක තමයි අපේ budget එක. ඒතර 1000ක් හදන්න අපිට පැය 40ක් ඕනේ. right? ඒතර standard එකේදී අපි කියන්නේ actual production එක, actual output එකට කොච්චර hours ඕනද කියන්නේ. ඇත්තටම අපි හැදුවේ 900. يعني standard එකට අනුව අපි ඒ 900 හදන්න කොච්චරක්ද allow කරන්නේ hours. ඒකට ඒක 36. එතකොට අපි work out කරා units ගාන ගත්තා, hours ගාන ගත්තා. එතකොට අපි බැලුවා per unit එකට අපි කොච්චර hours ප්‍රමාණයක් දෙනවද කියලා. ඒ අනුව 900 units වලට කීයක් දෙනවා. මේක budget එකට අනුව තමයි අපි ඒක derive කරගන්නේ. Right? That's what you must get clearly. තමයි පුතාලා පැහැදිලිව ගන්න ඕනේ. Hope you are clear so far. Now what we are going to do, we are going to do a simple extension. It's about this volume variance can further divide it into two. අපි දැන් දැක්ක volume variance එක ඕනනම් අපිට තව දුරටත් කොටස් දෙකකට බෙදන්න පුළුවන් කියලා තියෙනවා. Volume variance, right? What that two part? We'll see. When it comes to this volume variance, it says that is the volume variance. It can be divided into two categories like this: fixed overhead capacity usage variance and fixed overhead volume efficiency variance. So what about the capacity usage and what about the volume efficiency? When it comes to the capacity usage, you are going to take the actual hours into standard or the overhead absorption rate, I would say, and here budget into the standard overhead rate. So it's about the budget versus the actual situation. And here fixed overhead volume efficiency variance, you can take the standard fixed overhead into standard hours into actual into standard. So let's work that out, then only it makes perfect sense. Otherwise it may not be that much of clear. So අපි එක work out කරලා බලමු පුතා. Volume capacity. Volume capacity variance. There it talks about what you need to take the budgeted overhead. Now, one aspect is about the budgeted fixed cost must be there. Budgeted fixed cost එක තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒකෙන් ගන්න කියලා තියෙනවා ඊට පස්සේ standard fixed overhead into actual hours. It's about the overhead absorbed. Let me use that term, overhead absorbed. Then absorb කිරීමක් විතර තියෙන්නේ නේද? Actual එකෙන් වැඩි කරනවා කියන්නේ standard එක. එතන තියෙන්නේ overhead absorbed, fixed overhead absorbed. ඒ විදිහට අපි එක ගමු. Calculated hours 38 not given. Is it to calculate like 15 to 40? In the question it's given, Puta. Here you can see actual production was 900 units. Actual hours were 38 hours. Is that a subsequent change? I don't know whether the slides that you have may not be updated. Yes, I think this is the updated information. That's why you may be struggling to that. මේ information එක සමහරට ඔය පුතාලා slide එකේ නැතුව ඇති. ඒක check කරන්න. මේ අවසාන information එක එතන අපිට actual hours දීලා තියෙනවා. එතනයි මම ගත්තේ. Actual production was 900 unit, actual hours 38 hours, actual fixed cost 1900. Hope you are clear, right? Okay. So අපි බලමු දැන් කතා කරමින් හිටියේ volume variance එක කොටස් දෙකකට බෙදෙනවා. volume capacity එක අපි ගන්න කොහොමද? budgeted fixed cost, fixed overhead absorbed. So budgeted fixed overhead අපි ගන්නේ අපි budget කරා අපේ standard overhead absorption rate එක 50යි, hours 40යි. but fixed overhead absorb වෙන්නේ කොහොමද? එතන තියෙනවා rate එක 50යි, rate එකේ වෙනසක් නැහැ. වෙනස එන්නේ number of hours fixed overhead absorbed that is into actual hours. Actual hours kiyada? Actual hours 38. You can take 38 over there, right? Then if you work this out, it's 50 into 40. This is it, 2000. And here you have 15 to 38. So this is the budget and this is the actual situation. So therefore, what kind of variance is that? It's 100. Is it favorable or unfavorable? The volume capacity variance. What do you think? Is it favorable, unfavorable? Kita decide කරන්න පුතාලා. It's a favorable. Is that okay? Attempt is appreciated. So here, basically, what it says that you have planned for 40 hours, Puta, right? You have planned for 40 hours in the sense you planned for 1,000 units, but eventually you ended up working only 38 hours. So therefore, in that sense, it's unfavorable. It's unfavorable, isn't it? That's how you must interpret. You plan for 40 hours. Give me 1 second. You plan for 40 hours, the budgeted fixed cost. You planned for 40 hours, but you eventually ended up working 38 hours. නේ? අපි මේ සතිය පැය 40ක් වැඩ කරමු කියලා plan කරා. මෙතන අපි කතා කරන්නේ volume එකක් ගැන. So therefore, in terms of the volume, you are not efficient. Sorry, you are not, you have not used that to the budgeted amount. You planned for 40, but you ended up working 38. So it's budgeted is lower. How come the budget is low? The budgeted fixed cost is 15 to 40, 2,000. Here the fixed overhead 15 to 38, 1,900. So the budget is the greatest, isn't it? How you think of the fixed overhead? No, this is not something to do with the expenditure. You can see that here the expenditure remains. The only factor that changes is the hours. See, here it's 40 hours that you have planned. Budget represents the planning. And this is the hours that you had actually worked. So in that sense, you're unfavorable. පැය 40ක් වැඩ කරන්න plan කරා 38යි ඔයා වැඩ කරේ. Correct? Good. Right. The volume capacity variance, then you have the volume efficiency variance. The volume efficiency variance. So when it comes to the volume efficiency variance, so you can start with fixed overhead absorbed. Fixed overhead absorbed වලින් පටන් ගන්න. ඔයා අතන නැවතුණු තැනින් absorbed into standard fixed overhead. Actually absorb කරා 50ක් ගානේ 38ක් තමයි වැඩ කරේ. හැබැයි ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එකට අනුව යාට කීයක්ද ඉඩ දෙන්නේ? ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එකට අනුව යාට ඉඩ දෙන්නේ වැඩ කරන්න how much? ඒකක 900ක් හදන්න ඔයාට පුළුවන් පැය 36ක් භාවිතා කරන්න. පැය 36 ඔයාට භාවිතා කරන්න පුළුවන් මේ වැඩේට. So in that since it's 15 to 38, this much 15 to 36, 1,800, again 100. Is it favorable or unfavorable? For this task, you should have used 36 hours. මේක පැය 36කින් කරන්න තිබ්බ වැඩක්. ඒකක 900ක් හදන්න ඕනේ අපි ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එකට අනුව නම් පැය 36කින්. හැබැයි ඔයා මේක හැදුවේ පැය 38ක් භාවිතා කරලා. In that sense, you are unfavorable. And that's how this 200 comes. You saw that earlier, the volume variance is 200 unfavorable, 200 unfavorable. Now you see how it consists of 100 unfavorable, 100 unfavorable. අපි මේ volume variance එක තවදුරටත් අරගෙන ගිහිල්ලා පැහැදිලි කරමු. Right? Good. Unfavorable. Yes. Good. Okay. Right. Yes, this is about the volume variance. So here there must be a simple logic that you need to put it in a logical way, then only you may be able to make sense out of that, right? Okay, so there's one activity. I think we may not go for this activity. We'll keep it. If the time permits, we may come back and work this out. The answers are given for this activity. You need to work out the two uh, fixed cost related variances and the variable overhead related variances. You can even manage that. So you need to simply apply what we have learned. So if the time permit, we may come back and do. Now we may move on to the sales variances. I think the time would be left there. We can work that out later, right? We question එක පුතාලා lecture එකේ ඉතුරු කොටස කරලා ඇවිල්ලා ඒ ගාන හදමු. Right? Okay. So with that, we finish the discussion on the what you call the expenditure. So we discussed today the variable overhead variance and fixed overhead variance. So in the previous class, you discussed the material and the labor. So with that, we have discussed about the cost items. Now we are coming to the sales variance. It's about the revenue variance. Again, when it comes to the variance, it's about how much that you are deviating from the standard. So there's a standard, and then you are looking at how much that you have deviated from that. So the actual versus the standard. Okay. The sales variance can be used to analyze the performance of the sales function or the revenue centers. So you can basically use this sales variance to analyze the performance of the revenue centers. So they are in charge of the revenue, generating revenues. So you can see how good they are. The sales variance calculations are done in terms of profit or contribution margins rather than the sales value. So this is particularly important. So this is a point where it can go wrong. So when it comes to sales variances, right? When it comes to sales volume variance, especially, you are going to use the standard profit or standard contribution. පුතාලා මේක මතක තියාගන්න ඕනේ දෙයක් තමයි විශේෂයෙන්ම sales volume variance එක ගණනය කරන්න ආවම අපි එක්කෝ standard profit එක භාවිතා කරනවා එහෙම නැත්නම් standard contribution එක භාවිතා කරනවා. ඒක standard profit ද standard contribution ද කියන එක තීරණය වෙන්නේ ආයතනයේ තියෙන costing system එකත් එක්ක. ඒතර ඔයාගේ absorption costing system එකක් නම් තියෙන්නේ you have the standard profit. So if you have a marginal costing system, you need to use the standard contribution rather than the sales values. The sales variance, here we have the total sales margin variance. It is calculated in terms of the price variance and the sales margin volume variance. There's nothing called that the total sales variance that we may calculate at once, but instead we may be calculating the price variance and the margin volume variances. Please note that the sales variance formulas mentioned here are based on the marginal costing system. So here we are assuming the marginal costing system, so therefore contribution is what you may witness. So we'll see. That is even possible, right? Sorry. The total sales margin variance, I thought that it is not possible to work that out. Yeah, it's possible, right? Sorry for that. The total sales margin variance, you can see the actual sales contribution minus the budgeted contribution. ඉතින් පුතාලා අපි මෙතන assume කරන්නේ ආයතනයේ තියෙනවා කියන marginal costing system එක. ඒතර marginal costing system එක අපි කතා කරා මතක ඇති break even point analysis එකේදී අපි ගත්තා what do you call the sales, the variable cost, as a matter of that, the contribution, then you deduct the fixed cost and thereby the profit. So someone has switched on the mic here. Right, let me. Okay. So when you count this total sales margin variance, you can see the actual sales contribution you must take, and it must be you can deduct the budgeted contribution. Actual contribution minus the budgeted contribution is what the total sales margin variance. Okay. When it comes to the actual sales contribution per unit, how do you figure that out? You take the actual selling price minus standard variable cost of sale. එතකොට අපි actual sales contribution එක කොහොමද ගණනය කරන්නේ? Actual selling price එක ගන්නවා. ඒකින් standard variable cost එක අඩු කරනවා. Right? එතකොට මතක තියාගන්න actual එකකින් actual නෙමේ. Right? This is the point where you can go wrong. It's standard variable cost. Actual selling price minus the standard variable cost is what you take. Then you have the actual sales contribution per unit multiplied by the actual sales unit. That is the total contribution. And when it comes to the budgeted contribution per unit, you take the budgeted selling price, standard variable cost, and then you take the budgeted profit, and that is into budgeted sales in unit. And that gives you the budgeted contribution. So thereby, it gives you the total sales margin variance. So total sales variance. It is possible for you to calculate the total sales margin variance. Then it gets divided into two. That variance you are going to further analyze. That is based on the price variances and the volume variances. In that, you're going to take the price variance first. It's about the actual selling price minus the standard selling price into the actual sales volume. So selling price එකේදී අපි බලන්නේ අර කලින් කතා කරපු විදිහම පුතා actual selling price එක සහ budgeted selling price එක අතර වෙනස. ඒක අපි actual sales volume එකෙන් ගුණ කරනවා. එතකොට අපිට එනවා sales margin price variance. Volume variance එකේදී අපි කරන්නේ මොකක්ද? Actual sales volume budgeted sales volume. So volume එකේ සිද්ධ වෙන වෙනස standard contribution එකෙන් තමයි multiply කරන්නේ. එතකොට අපිට එනවා sales margin volume variance. So මේ දෙකේ එකතුවක් අපි කියනවා total sales margin variance කියලා. Right? So we may go and work out and see. So here the only point what you need to remember is that it's about the standard cost is what you are taking. So when you are calculating the contribution, the standard cost would come into play. Right? When it comes to this contribution, is standard cost. It goes by the standard contribution. Okay, let us see that through an example, then it would be more convinced. So let us take an example and let's work out that. අපි example එකක් විදිහට අරගෙන work out කරලා බලමු පුතාලා. ඒතර ඒක වඩා පැහැදිලි වෙයි. Right. The budgeted selling price of a unit is rupees 25. Budgeted selling price is given. Budgeted selling units was 200. So budget එක තියෙනවා. The actual selling price is 25. Actual selling quantity is given. Standard variable cost given. Actual cost is given. So it's all about picking the right information. So when it comes to the total sales variance, sales margin variance is calculated. The total sales margin variance is calculated. You're going to take the actual contribution minus standard contribution. Again, actual versus the standard, I think, right? Was it budgeted what we use? Let's just check that. Budgeted contribution. No? So here standard is replaced by budgeted. Huh? But at the end of the day mean the standard. Okay. So when you come to the actual contribution, what you need to do, you need to take the actual selling price minus the standard cost is what you would take. So here the question says that the actual selling price is 24. We may take that. And you need to deduct the standard cost. Right, sorry. Standard cost, how much? Standard variable cost 22. So therefore, actual selling price is 24. It's 22, the cost, and how many units that you have sold. Actually, you have sold check that. Actually, you have sold 210. 210. So this is about your actual contribution. Then from this, you need to deduct the budgeted contribution. So the budgeted selling price 25. You thought of selling them at 25. Then the budgeted or the standard variable cost 22, and that is into budgeted number of units. You thought of selling 200 units. So that's about the budgeted contribution. So here the most important thing what you need to notice is that what is new in case of actual contribution and the budgeted contribution, you are taking the standard variable cost. මේ දෙකේම අපි standard variable cost එක තමයි use කරේ. ඒතකොට ඒක තමයි පුතාලා මෙතන notice කරන්න ඕනේ වැදගත්ම දේ. එතකොට මේ දෙකේම අපි standard variable cost එක තමයි අරන් තියෙන්නේ. Right? So that is a fact what you need to notice. Then if you would ask me, why is that? Why it is not the actual what do you call the variable cost is being taken rather than the budgeted one is being taken. So because we always try to know the rationale. We always try to know the rationale. That particular question, so I'll be answering that when it comes to the operating statement. මම මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ පුතාලට answer කරන්නම් operating statement එක ගැන කතා කරනවා. There's a logic in why we are doing so. So I might try to explain that logic when it comes to the operating statement, right? Operating statement එකට ආවම මේක පැහැදිලි කරන්න. So here you can see it's 2 into 210, it's 420. Here you can see it's 3 into 200, 600. So this is the budget and this is the actual. So it's 180 difference. It's a kind of a unfavorable one. You plan for 600 contribution, but at the end of the day, the contribution what you had received, it is 180, 420. So it's a unfavorable. Now what we are going to do, so we are going to split this. We are going to split this. Split current. It's about the sales margin price variance. Just want to check the terminology. Sales margin price variance. Okay. It's sales margin price variance. Sales margin price variance. So here, as it suggests, what you want to look at, it's about the price variance. So it must be something to do with the actual price and the budgeted price. The price එක තමයි vary වෙන්නේ. That is into standard contribution, no? Actual sales volume, sorry, sales volume. It's actual sales volume. An actual sales volume maker. Right. So if you are to apply that, actual price is how much? It's 24. Budgeted, thought of selling at 25. So then how much you could manage to sell? How many units you could manage to sell? Actual selling quantity, it's 210. So it's 1 into 210. What kind of difference is that? Actual price is less than the budgeted price. So it's obvious it's a unfavorable one. ඒක ගොඩක් පැහැදිලි. Actual price එක budgeted price එකට වඩා අඩුයි. එහෙනම් ඒක unfavorable. Then next, it's about the sales margin. Sales margin contribution. Sorry, sales margin. Yeah, what is that? Sales margin volume. Sorry, volume variance. So when it comes to the volume variance, you need to look at the actual contribution. Actual contribution minus budgeted contribution into the volume. Sorry, it's actual volume. Actual volume versus the budgeted volume into standard contribution. So you have planned how many units you have planned? You have planned for 200. Actually, you have sold 210. So here you can see 210 is 200. And the standard contribution, in fact, you have calculated that early. It's 25 minus 22. It's 25 minus 22. It's 3. It's 3 into 10. It is 30. 3 into 10. It's 30. So the actual volume is 210, but you thought of 200. So therefore, you are quite good in terms of unit, in terms of volume, it's good. So then you can see this 180, how it has come. 210 unfavorable movement in the sales price. And when it comes to margin, you can see that it's 30. So as a matter of this favorable and unfavorable movement, the end result is total sales margin variance is 180 unfavorable. So it's actual contribution minus budgeted contribution. So here the key point, when it comes to the standard or when it comes to the actual contribution, you use the standard variable overhead cost. Standard variable overhead cost. Right here, you need to remember some, but once you work out a couple of questions, that may be familiar to you. So this is it, what we have worked out. Okay, so let's work out one question on that, then that would be more convinced. හරි පුතාලා question එකක් work out කරන්න බලන්න. Activity 9.4 චුට්ටක් try කරන්න. Then you would be exposed to this and then we may continue the discussion. Just give it a try. Take 5 to 10 minutes. විනාඩි 5 10ක් කරගෙන attempt කරන්න බලන්න ඒක පුතාලා. Right. Hope you would have attempted that. So can we look at that? So then you would have had the experience on the computation, and probably you would have managed that. So, okay. So first, let us calculate the sales price variance. Yeah, sales price variance. So here, if I ask you, what is the costing system that they might have used? මොකද අර මේ ආයතනයේ මොකක්ද costing system එක භාවිතා කරන්න ඇත්තේ? When it comes to sales price variance, it's all about, very correct, it's absorption costing. So because the standard profit is what it was given, very correct, good job. Huh? So here you need to take, it's about the sales price variance, actual price versus standard price. Actual price versus standard price, no? And that is into standard or budgeted price, no? We call it budgeted price, and that is into the actual sales volume. Actual sales volume. So here it says that product at 50. The plan to sell 12,000 at 50. The standard cost 35. However, the total sales made during the January were 576,000, 11,200 units. So you can work out the price 576,000 divided by 11,200. So it's 51.42, 4286 to be precise. Let's say it's, yeah, roughly 43. That's the actual price. And what is the standard price? That was 50, and that is into the unit, actual sales unit, 11,200. 11,200 units. So there you can see 51.43 minus 50. It's into 11,200. So it's 16,016. Is it a kind of favorable one or unfavorable one? It's obvious the actual price is more than the plan, so it's a favorable one. It's pretty obvious, no? So yeah, good. 16,016, very correct. You've done it very nicely. And the volume variance, what about the volume variance? The next one. Volume variance, it's going to be the actual volume minus the budgeted volume, into the standard contribution, right? Sorry, standard profit. Standard profit. So if you take that actual volume versus the budgeted volume, actual volume was 11,200. 11,200. Budgeted, you have planned for 12,000. Into standard profit, you expect to sell them at 50, and standard cost was 35 or something. So this is it, standard profit. $11,200 minus 12,000 into 50 minus 35, it's 12,000. Minus figures not required. So the minus or positive, it's not required. Let me take it the stretch, 800 into 50. 800 into 15 is 12,000. What kind of difference is that? Actual volume is less than the budgeted, so therefore it's an unfavorable one. Unfavorable one. Yes, very correct. Then shall we work out the entire thing together? It's called the sales margin variance, no? Sales margin variance. It was about the actual total profit minus total budgeted profit, no? Budgeted. Earlier we go by the contribution, now it has to be replaced by the profit. The actual contribution, budgeted contribution. Yes, there we have it. The total actual profit, how you take, but here you need to be conscious, because when it comes to the actual profit, even we were supposed to take the standard cost. Actual selling price, in fact, we decided it was 51.43 minus 35. And that is into, when it comes to the number of units, I think it's actual units, it's 11,200 minus, as per the budget, it was 50, 35, but we planned how much? 12,000. No? So if you take that 51.43 minus 35 into 11,200. Here it was 15 into 12,000. So if you take the difference, there it comes 184 minus 180, 4,016. It's a favorable one. So in fact, that coincides. No? 16,016, 12,000. So once you take that, it's 4,016. So it suggests we have done it correctly. Yes. Actual cost information given, sir. It's actual cost information. Actual cost information is need not put up, because the question that was the point I was making. So here, when we are taking the actual sales contribution, also we are taking the standard variable cost. Budgeted, anyhow we have to take that, no? So this is the point what you need to get clarified. And I told you that I'll be explaining that later. Right? So at the moment, just remember that. Then I will show what is the logic for that. In fact, there's a logic for that. Right? ඒකටත් logic එකක් තියෙනවා පුතාලා. අපි බලමු මොකද ඇයි actual sales contribution එක ගන්නකොට මේ standard variable cost එක ගන්න කියන්නේ කියලා. So the rest of the information is fine, but this seems little odd. මේක පොඩ්ඩක් odd වගේ පේනවා නේ. අපි ඒකට rational එක මොකක්ද කියලා හොයාගමු. Right. Good. That's how we can compute the sales variance. So with that, we have managed to discuss, we have managed to work out. So here the answers are a little different because they have taken it like 51.42, right? But in our case, we took, it is 43. That's why it's different, but it's otherwise it's same. Right. So far what we have done, we have discussed the cost variances as well as the revenue variances. So මේ දක්වපු දාලා අපි cost variances කතා කරා, ඒ වගේම revenue variances කතා කරා. ඒතකොට දැන් අපි මොකක්ද කරන්න යන්නේ, මේ cost variances සහ revenue variances අරගෙන අපි explain කරන්න උත්සාහ කරනවා difference between the budgeted profit for a period and the actual profit for the period. And when we try to put all these variances, the sales variances or the revenue variances as well as the cost variances in a single sheet, so you can explain the difference between the budgeted profit for a period and the actual profit for the period. Right? So පුතාලා අපි මේ කතා කරපු සියලුම variances cost variances, revenue variances මේ සියල්ලක්ම අපි consider කරොත් අපිට පුළුවන් වෙනවා යම්කිසි කාල පරිච්ඡේදයක ආයතනයක තියෙන budgeted profit එක නැත්නම් plan එක actual situation එකෙන් වෙනස් වුණේ ඇයි කියන එක explain කරනවා. Right? For that purpose, we'll be preparing a statement and we call it, that is the operating statement. Or sometimes we used to say that statement of variance, statement of reconciliation. So we are going to reconcile the budgeted profit with the actual profit. Then when it comes to these revenue variances and the cost variances, that is what explain why there is a difference between these two profits. A document that gives the original plan or the actuals and the deviation through variances is normally known as an operating statement. So it shows the original plan in the sense the budgeted profit and the actual profit, thereby the deviation. That is what we call the operating statement. If I'm to show you the structure, it's like this. You start with the budgeted profit, then you put all the variances, and you may be ended up getting in the actual profit. So therefore, that is in essence, you can compare the budget versus the actual and the deviation. So that's what it shows in operating statement. තරපුතාලගේ plan එක තියෙනවා. ඒක තමයි operate what you call the budgeted profit. Actual situation එක තියෙනවා. ඒක තමයි actual scenario එක. ඒ අනුව මේ දෙකේ වෙනසක් තියෙන්නේ ඇයි? ඒක තමයි deviation. So that's what it shows in the operating statement. So it's a kind of a reconciliation of the budgeted profit and the actual profit. The purpose is to provide information to relevant managers for eventual decision-making purpose. So we are providing this with the managers who are in charge of making decisions. So the variants are given in as much detail as possible. So we are trying to put the variances as much detail as possible. So therefore, we are trying to put, if it is, say, sales variance, so we may be taking the sales volume variance and also the sales price variance. If it is a kind of expenditure variance, we may try to put it as the expense variance and also the efficiency variance likewise. So we try to provide them as detailed as possible. So then the managers are in a better position to make a decision based on that. If the statement starts with the budgeted profit, so that is again the difference, what it highlights. It's about what we call that the absorption costing system versus the marginal costing system. So under absorption costing system, we start with the budgeted profit, whereas under a marginal costing system, they may be started with the budgeted contribution. So it depends. And thereafter, what you have to do, if there are some favorable variances, add them. If there are some unfavorable variances, deduct them. So that's what it does. So it's as simple as that. Start with the budgeted profit or the budgeted contribution, add the favorable variances because they will eventually increase your profit, and deduct the adverse variances or the unfavorable variances as they decrease the profit. Then I told you that it was about the marginal costing system and the absorption costing system. The main difference between the absorption and the marginal costing operating statements are as follows. The marginal costing operating statement has a sales volume variance that is calculated using the standard contribution per unit rather than the standard profit per unit. So in fact, we have discussed that. Volume variance එකේ අපි standard profit එක ගත්ත එක අවස්ථාවක අනිත් වෙලාව අපි ගත්ත standard contribution එක. ඒක එක වෙනසක්. අනිත් වෙනස තමයි there is no fixed overhead volume variance in the marginal costing operating system statement. ඒක පුතාලා ගත්තොත් absorption costing system එක අපි දැක්කා, අපි assume කරේ ඇත්තටම absorption costing system එකක් කලින් ඒ අනුව අපි දැක්කා when it comes to fixed overhead, there are two types of variances. What is that? The fixed overhead expenditure variance, fixed overhead volume variance. විදියට දෙකක් අපි ගණනය කරා. Now පුතාලා දන්නවා absorption costing marginal costing system එක අපි overhead absorb කරන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට ඒ වෙනුවට අපේ තියෙන්නේ actual cost එක සහ budgeted cost එක විතරයි. Actual fixed cost තියෙනවා, budgeted fixed cost තියෙනවා. එතකොට fixed overhead cost variance එක වෙන්නේ සමස්තයම fixed overhead expenditure variance එක. එතන මතක ඇති fixed overhead expenditure variance එක අපි කොහොමද ගණනය කරේ? budgeted fixed overhead actual fixed overhead. එතන මේ විදිහට තමයි අපි ගණනය කරේ fixed overhead expenditure. එතකොට marginal costing system එක අපේ තියෙන්නේ මෙන්න මේ කියන වෙනස විතරයි. It's just the expenditure variance. There's no volume variance. මොකද the fundamental thing is that when it comes to a marginal costing system, we are not going to absorb the fixed cost. We are simply taking it as a expenditure. It's a fixed amount. We deduct it from the contribution. Whereas under absorption system, we are absorbing the fixed cost. So because of that, the volume variances are possible. But under marginal costing system, we don't have it. So therefore, under marginal costing system, if you had prepared the operating statement, it is unlikely to see any fixed overhead volume variance. It's a very obvious thing, right? So that is the only two differences out there. ඒක තමයි වෙනස්කම. ඒක costing system එකකින් එන්නේ. So this is the case under a absorption costing operating system. Sorry. The absorption costing operating system, you can see that we start with the budgeted profit. Then you take the sales volume variance and then you get into the standard profit. Then the price variance is adjusted and thereafter the cost variances. The fixed overhead expenditure volume. So this is what it was mentioned. This is absorption costing system. So therefore the volume variance can be there. When it comes to the marginal costing system, you can see that no fixed overhead volume variance, only the expenditure. And also the budgeted contribution and standard contribution. Then the sales volume variance is adjusted here, right? So that's how it goes. So මම කිව්ව පුතාලට sales variances වලදී ඇයි අපි අර වගේ standard profit එක භාවිතා කරේ කියන එක පැහැදිලි කරන්නම් කියලා. ඒත් අපි ගත්තොත් sales margin එකත් sales variances වලට කියොත් අපි ගත්තොත් sales margin variance වල then අපි standard contribution එක තමයි අරගෙන තියෙන්නේ, right? ඒත් ඒක තමයි අපි මෙතනත් දැක්කේ standard contribution එක තමයි ගන්නෙ actual sales contribution එක යටතේ. ඒ point එක තමයි මෙතන standard contribution එක විදිහට තමයි තියෙන්නේ sales margin variances වල. ඒත් මම දැන් පෙන්නන්න ඔයාලට ඇයි එහෙම standard contribution එක අපි ගන්න ඕනේ කියන කාරණාව. දැන් මට පොඩි ඒකට උදාහරණයක් ගන්න වෙයි. සරල දෙයක්. ඒතර පුතාලා දැක්ක operating statement එක තියෙන්නේ කොහොමද structure එක? අපි budgeted profit එක තියෙනවා. ඒකට sales volume variance එක adjust කරාට පස්සේ අපිට එනවා standard profit එක. Right? So let me take that particular part. මම ඒක කොටස ගන්න. You saw that the budgeted profit is there. Budgeted profit. Right? Then once you adjust the sales volume variance එක adjust කරාට පස්සේ ඔයාට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා standard profit එක ඔයාට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට අපි යම්සි කාල පරිච්ඡේදයක් හිතමු. Let's say that you have planned for 12,000 units, right? අපි තුමු යම්සි කාල පරිච්ඡේදයක ඔයා හිතනවා කියලා 12,000 units හදන්න, right? ඒකට ඔයාට actually කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ අපි හිතමු ඒකක 10,000 මේ වගේ තත්ත්වයක්, right? In this situation, this is the units. So මෙතන තියෙනවා අපි හිතමු selling price එකකුත් තියෙනවා. අපි හිතමු එකකයක් අපි හිතනවා 60 ගානේ. cost එක තියෙනවා එකට standard cost standard cost එක අපි හිතමු 15ක් තියෙනවා. actual ඒවා අවශ්‍යත් නැහැ. මම දාන්න අපි රුපියල් 55 ගන්න වික්ක ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් කොස්ට් එක ඒක අවශ්‍ය නැහැ මෙතෙන්ට අපි මේ වගේ තත්ත්වයක් රයිට්. එතකොට බජට් එක. එතකොට බජටඩ් ප්‍රොෆිට් එක අපිට වර්ක් අවුට් කරන්න පුළුවන්. බජටඩ් profit එක එනවා 45. So this is going to be the standard profit. Standard profit එක කීයක්ද තියෙන්නේ 45ක් තියෙනවා. right. එතකොට මම ගත්තොත් budgeted profit එක කියලා පුතාලා අපිට එනවා 45 into 12,000 units. It's 540,000 budgeted profit එක right. budgeted profit එක. ඊට පස්සේ අපි work out කරමු දැන් standard profit එක. මේ තත්ත්වයේ standard profit එක අපි work out කරමු. ඒතර budget එක මේක standard එක කියන්නේ අපි දන්නවා actual එකේ standard එක actual situation එකට අදාළවයි ඒක prepare වෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒතකොට 10,000 units තමයි හැදුවේ. ඒතර අපි මේක standard එක ගත්තොත් අපි ගන්න ඕනේ. එතන 10,000 units. එතන තියෙන්නේ selling price එක standard price එකමයි ඉන්නේ. standard cost එක 15 ඒ අනුව profit එක 45යි. ඒතර මේ තත්ත්වය තුල මම standard profit එක work out කරොත් මට පේනවා standard profit එක වෙන්න ඕනේ 45 multiplied by 10,000 450,000. එතකොට ඔයාලට පේන operating statement එක බැලුවොත් මේ budgeted profit එකට අපි sales volume variance එක work out කරපුවම තමයි standard profit එක එන්න ඕනේ. මොකද අපි statement එක හදන්න ගියපුවම standard profit එක දෙන්නේ නැහැ. අපිට දෙන්නේ variances ටික විතරයි. budgeted profit එක දෙරි variances ටික දෙන්නේ. ඒවා apply කරලා අදාළ තැන් වලට අරගෙන තමයි අපි actual profit එක derive කරගන්නේ. right? ඒතකොට standard profit එක දෙන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට අපි මේ standard profit එක දැන් දන්නවා අපි හරියට මේක 450,000 තමයි වෙන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට ඒක ගන්න කියන්නේ sales volume variance එක adjust කරලා. ඒතකොට පුතාලට මතකයි කොහොමද අපි sales volume variance එක adjust කරන්නේ? right? This is standard profit. මේකයි කරන අපි බලමු මේක එනවද කියලා. right? This is standard profit. So the sales volume variances, how we got it? It's actual volume, I think. Let me write that as well. It's actual volume minus the budgeted volume. Budget කරපු volume එක actual volume එකෙන් අයින් කරලා ඊට පස්සේ අපි මොකද කරන්නේ? අපි ඒක multiply කරන්න කිව්වා. මතක ඇති standard profit එකනේ. standard profit. මේක තමයි අපිට figure out කරන්න ඕනේ. ඇයි standard profit එකෙන් multiply කරන්න කිව්වේ කියන එක. ඒතර ඒක තමයි අපිට මේ වෙලාවේ මොකක් හරි rational එකක් ගන්න බැරි වුණේ මේ standard profit කියන කතාවට. ඒක තමයි මෙතන තියෙන්නේ right. එතකොට අපි බැලුවොත් actual volume එක කීයද අපේ 10000යි budget එක 12000යි standard profit එක 45යි. එතකොට 2000 into 45 ඒක මොන විදිහේ variance එකක්ද? ඒක unfavorable. unfavorable variances අපි මොකක්ද කරන්න කිව්වේ? අඩු කරන්න කියලා කිව්වා. එහෙනම් ඒ 90 අඩුවීමක් තමයි වෙන්නේ. එතකොට අපි දැන් බැලුවොත් standard profit එක කීයද? 450,000. එතකොට අපි කලින් work out කරපු standard profit එක 450,000 අන්න ඒ answer එක ඇවිල්ලා තියෙනවා. එතකොට අපිට මේ sales volume variance එක budget profit එකට adjust කිරීම තුළ derive කරන්න අවශ්‍යයි standard cost එක. ඒක නිවැරදි විදිහට derive වෙන්නේ අපි මෙතන standard profit එක ගත්තොත්. actual profit එක අන්න මේ අපි ගන්න ඕනේ standard profit එක. අන්න ඒ නිසා තමයි මෙතන පුතාලා මේවා දෙනකොට අපේ actual sales contribution එක හදනකොටත් අපිට standard variable cost එක ගන්න කියන්නේ මෙතනත් standard variable cost එක ගන්න කියන්නේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් ඔයාලට පෙනේ මෙතන වෙනසක්. දැන් sales margin එකේ නම් actual sales price එක දාන්න කියනවා. actual sales volume එක දාලා actual selling price standard selling price. නේ? ඒතර මෙතන විතරක් standard contribution එක දාන්න කියනවා. ඒතර ඒක ඇයි කියන එක ඔයාට rationalize කරගන්න ඕන නම් ඒකට අදාළ rationale එක තමයි මම පෙන්නන්නේ. ඔයාට budgeted profit එකෙන් standard profit එක derive කරන්න නම් ඔයාට මේ විදිහට තමයි මේක ගන්න වෙන්නේ. So that explain why it was calculated like this. Hope it is clear, right? That's the rationale. Okay, then we can move on to the cost control, the final slide, the cost control and cost reduction. So is that clear to you? So what before I move on to this slide, would like to ask. Yeah. Yes. Hope you all are clear that. Okay, no one is going to respond. So if it is not, then better just let me know. Yeah. Could you explain previous rationale again, right? Okay, good. Then පුතා මම පැහැදිලි කරන්න උත්සාහ කරේ මෙතන අපි දැක්කා sales margin compute කරද්දී මෙතන අපිට actual sales contribution එක ගණනය කිරීමේදී අපි දැක්ක actual selling price එකකින් standard variable cost එක තමයි අඩු කරලා තිබ්බේ. නමුත් අපිට ප්‍රශ්නයක් එනවානේ සාධාරණව ඇයි ඒක actual variable cost එක නොවුනේ කියන එක. නේ? actual variable cost එක උනේ නැත්තේ ඇයි කියන එක අපිට ඒක ගැටලුවක්. ඒතකොට ඒක අපි දන්නවා මේ total sales margin කියන එක තමයි extend වෙන්නේ subdivide වෙන්නේ sales margin price සහ sales margin volume කියලා. ඒතකොට sales මෙතන මේ තිබුණ දේ තමයි reflect වෙන්නේ මෙතනත් standard contribution එක අරගෙන තියෙන්නේ. දැන් අපිට පේනවා sales margin එකේ actual sales volume එක ගත්තා මෙතන standard contribution එක ගන්න කියනවා. ඒතකොට ඇයි ඒක actual contribution එක උනේ නැත්තේ? standard contribution එක ගන්න කියන්නේ ඇයි? ඔය කියන ප්‍රශ්නේ අපිට rationalize කරගන්න ඕනේ. මේව දැන් අපිට මතක තියාගෙන දාන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක එක approach එකක්. නමුත් ඒකට නෙමෙයිනේ අපෙන් වෙන්න ඕනේ නේද? අපි ඒක we need to think why නේ? එතකොට ඒක අපි investigate කරන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට ඒක investigate කරද්දී අපි දැක්කා මේ වගේ statement එකක් හැදිලා තියෙනවා. right? ඒක අපි කියනවා operating statement එක. ඒතර operating statement structure එක ගත්තොත් අපිට පේනවා budgeted profit එකකින් අපි standard profit එක derive කරලා තියෙනවා. මේ statement එකේ requirement එකක් විදියට. එතකොට ඒක derive කරේ කොහොමද? budgeted profit එකෙන් sales volume variance එක deduct කරපුවා. එතකොට අපි ගත්තොත් budgeted profit එක මේ work out කරලා මම පෙන්නනවා පුතාලට 450,000 එනවා. standard profit එක work out කරපුවම 450 එනවා. එතකොට මෙතන 4,50,000 එන්න නම් මෙතනින් 90,000ක් අඩු වෙන්න ඕන. එතකොට මේ 90,000 අඩු වෙන්න නම් ඒක එන්නේ කොහොමද? sales volume variance එකේ අපි අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම standard profit එක භාවිතා කරොත් විතරයි ඒක ලැබෙන්නේ. අපි මෙතන actual profit එක භාවිතා කරා කියලා හිතන්න පුතාලා. අපි හිතමු මෙතන actual situation එක මම වෙනම ගන්නවා. actual information වලට ගත්තොත් අපි හිතමු selling price එක actual cost එක හිතමු ඒකට 20ක් තිබ්බා කියලා. යන actual profit එක 30 20ක් ගියාම 55ක්. ඒක actual profit එක 35ක් වෙනවා. දැන් බැරි වෙලා හරි අපි මෙතන actual profit එක දාලා multiply කරොත් ඒ answer එක අපිට එන්නේ නැහැ. isn't it? ඒතර අපිට එන්නේ වෙන answer එකක් නේ. එතකොට 10 වැඩි කිරීම 2000 වැඩි කිරීම 35. එතකොට අපිට ආන්සර් එන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට අපිට එන්නේ 4,70,000ක් වගේ. එතකොට ඒක නෙමෙයි අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ. ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් ප්‍රොෆිට් එක 4,50,000යි. ඒක ලැබෙන්න නම් අනිවාර්යෙන් මෙතෙන්ට ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් ප්‍රොෆිට් එක තමයි එන්න ඕනේ. ඒ නිසා තමයි ෆෝමියුලා එක ඩිරයිව් කිරීමේදී එතන ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් ප්‍රොෆිට් එක අරන් තියෙන්නේ. right? ඒතර ඒක මම තව චුට්ටක් දුරට ගිහිල්ලා ඒක ඇයි කියන question එක තමයි අපි address කරගත්තේ. right? Just to figure out the rationale. Now you know even the rationale. Good. Okay, you are getting that, no? Fine. So moving on to this slide, we'll see the cost control and the cost reduction. We'll see what is the difference between these two concepts, or is it the same concept? What is that? Let's see. The cost control and cost reduction. When it comes to cost control, generally the cost of a product or service is estimated before the production. So you know, obviously, when it comes to a kind of a product or a service, we may doing the costing in advance. So most of the time, especially for the planning purposes, so we need to do that. So otherwise we can't exercise any control. So in fact, this variance analysis, the budgeting, the standard, everything helps us with planning. An organization may take action to keep the cost within the estimated cost, and that is called the cost control. So once you establish a standard, then you try to keep your cost to that standard. Terutama api yang kisi standard එකක් establish කරගත්තා. අපි හිතමු labor සඳහා යන cost එක කියලා. labor hour එකට අපි ගෙවන ගාන. ඒතොර ඒක අපි standard එක. අපි හිතමු standard එක 50යි. labor hour එකට අපි පැයකට ගෙවන්නේ 50. ඒතොර අපි try කරනවා කොහොම හරි මේ labor cost එක පැයකට 50 කියන rate එකේ තියාගන්න. ඒතොර අපි උත්සාහ කරන actual cost එක to keep it that in line with the estimated cost. So it is the cost control. That's what we call the cost control. Nothing wrong about that. So we should try to keep our cost in line with the estimated cost. Usually below techniques are used for cost control. For the cost control, you can use the budgetary control and the standard costing. So in the standard costing, it gives you more insight as to the deviation. So therefore you may be able to control it in the future. And even when it comes to the budgets, that's the same thing it does. So the budgets and the standard cost basically help you with controlling the cost. Cost control කරන්න පුතාට උදව් වෙනවා budget සහ standard costing. So that's why we discussed that the budgeting and the standard costing is mainly to help you with the control. Even the budgeting used for the planning, but standard costing is dedicated for the cost control, and also the budgets in a way it also help to exercise some control, because that gives you with the expectation. So once you know the expectation, then you can better manage it. In that sense, it helps you with the control. When it comes to the cost reduction, or we call it the cost cutting, is a technique which we use to reduce the standard cost of a product. So it's a kind of a very narrow in scope compared to the cost control. Here what we are trying to do, we are trying to cut the cost, right? We are going to reduce the cost without compromising its quality or functionality. So the cost reduction is a technique we use to reduce the standard cost of a product. So our scope, or the kind of a unit, what we consider it's a product, and we are trying to reduce that. The techniques such as variety reduction, the value analysis, value engineering, work study, organization, and methods can be used for cost reduction. So when it comes to this cost reduction, basically, there are different methods available. You can do a kind of value analysis. So by analyzing the product, so you can look at what are the activities that this particular product consumes, and then you can identify what are the value adding activities and non-value adding activities. So thereby you can get rid from the non-value adding activities. So then you can reduce the cost. So අපිට මේ product එක cost එක අඩු කරන්න විවිධ ක්‍රම තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට එක ප්‍රධාන ක්‍රමයක් තමයි අපි මේ කතා කරන value analysis එක. එතකොට එතනදී අපි මොකක්ද කරන්නේ? මේ යම්කිසි product එකක් හදන්න යන විවිධ activities බලන්න. උදාහරණ මතකයේදී activity costing වලදී අපි කතා කරා the activities that it consume. එතකොට මේ activities බලලා ඒ වගේම අපි non value adding activities ඉවත් කරනවා. ඒක cost reduction කරන්න පුළුවන් දෙයක්. And also the value engineering. So it's a kind of a technique. So you can look at the value chain. So then you can even what we say that you are going to unpack a particular product, right? And then through that you may be able to figure out certain ways of get rid from certain elements. So මෙතන වෙන්නේ යම්කිසි product එකක තියෙන ඒක unpack කරලා බලනවා අපි නේ. මොකක් හරි අපි හිතමු vehicle එකක් කියලා. ඒතකොට මේ vehicle එකේ තියෙන විවිධ parts ඔක්කොම අපි ගලවලා බලනවා. ඒකට ඒකේ engine එක ගන්නවා. එතකොට අපිට පුළුවන් gear box, body එක මේ විදිහට සෑම part එකක්ම ඔක්කොම ගලවලා අපි වෙන වෙනම අරගෙන අපි බලනවා මේ vehicle එක function වෙන්න නම් in minimum තියෙන්න ඕනේ අංග ටික මොකක්ද, components ටික මොකක්ද. එහෙනම් ඒ components ටික එකතු කරලා අපි vehicle එක හදනවා. එතකොට අපිට අන්න value engineering එකක් අපිට පුළුවන් එතකොට cost එක reduce කරන්න ඒකේ අත්‍යවශ්‍ය නැති අංග ඉවත් කරන්න පුළුවන්, right? Especially so the value engineering was particularly applicable even when it comes to that manufacturing of the Tata nano car. You might have heard about that. Tata nano car එක හදනකොට ඒකට යාළුවගේ target එක තිබිලා තියෙන්නේ රුපියල් ලක්ෂයක cost එකකට හදන්න. ඒකට යාළුවා හිතලා තියෙනවා මේ ලක්ෂයක cost එකකට මේ product එක හදන්න නම් ඒකේ තියෙන්න ඕන දේවල් මොනවද කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ යාළුවා so somehow the Tata company is going to figure out to work out a kind of a vehicle for 100,000. So for the engine, they are using a kind of a 3-wheel engine, right? And even when it comes to the seat, they have compromised the comfort over the functionality, right? ඒකට අපි ගත්තොත් දන්නවා Tata Nano car එකක් ගත්තොත් ඒක ගොඩක් comfortable නෑනේ. ඒකේ very basic features ටිකක් තමයි තියෙන්නේ. නමුත් කොහොම හරි යාලා figure out කරගත්තා ඒ කියන ලක්ෂයක Indian rupees ලක්ෂයකට ඒ vehicle එක manufacture කරනවා. ඒතකොට එතන තියෙන value engineering. They think about each of the aspects of the vehicle in detail and thereby they are coming up with the desired product. And the work study, so you can study the work and then you can think about reducing the cost. So likewise, so when it comes to this cost reduction, basically it operates in the domain of a particular product. So a particular product එකක් කියන domain එකේ තමයි මේක වැඩ කරන්නේ. ඒකට ඒක බොහොම narrow in focus. But when it comes to cost control, it's a very broad area. So it's in fact, controlling is a kind of management function. So you know the planning and organizing, and also what are the 4 aspects? The planning is there. You need to organize that, and you need to implement that, and finally you need to control that. So therefore, when it comes to this control, it's one of the management functions. So therefore, it is dealt at the larger scale. It's big in scope. And when it comes to a kind of management accounting arena, there we may use certain techniques to achieve that. So therefore, it's a very broader concept. So අපි බැලුවොත් දැන් basically මේ cost control සහ cost reduction එක කියන්නේ පුතාලා. ඒතර cost control කියන්නේ මේක ගොඩක් broad area එකක් නේ. ඒතකොට ඒක management function එකක්. controlling කියන එක. ඒතකොට ඒක විවිධ aspects වලට අදාළයි නේ. ඒතර මුළු සමස්ත ආයතනයම සැලකිල්ලට ගන්නවා. It's quite big in focus, or it's not the scope is quite big. ඒතකොට මේ වගේ සමස්ත ආයතනයක් සැලකිල්ලට අරගෙන මේ ආයතනයේ කොහොමද තියෙන cost එක control වෙන්නේ කියන එක බලන්න. ඒතකොට ඒ සඳහා අපි budgetary control standard costing භාවිත කරනවා. නමුත් cost reduction එකක් අපි කතා කරන්නේ to reduce the standard cost of a product. ඒකේ domain එක product එක. ඒතකොට මේ product එක කොහොමද cost එක අඩු කරන්නේ without compromising the quality and functionality. But to be frank, the quality and functionality may be compromised to a certain degree. The quality එකවත් functionality එකවත් අඩු කරන්න ඕනේ නැති වුණාට සමහර වෙලාවට ඒක යම් මට්ටමකට compromise වීමක් සිද්ධ වෙනවා in reality, right? So it's about the two basic concepts what you need to be clear on. So now I think if you wish we can go back to the activity and we can work that out. So what's your thought on this? So shall we work out this activity in no time, or can you manage to do that on your own? මේ question එක අපි work out කරලා බලමුද? ඒක නැත්තම් පුතාලා manage කරගන්න. So what's your thought on that? And we can do accordingly. Shall we take some time and let's quickly work that out? අපි ඒකත් ඉවර කරමුද? එතකොට we are complete, no? Okay. The ABC Limited is planning to produce 3,000 units per period of the product beta. The following standard cost sheet is given. Material is given 5 kilograms, 10 per kilogram, 4 hours labor into 5 per hour, variable overhead 8 hours, rupees 5 per hour, fixed overhead 5 hours, and rupees 6 per hour. Total cost is 140. Budgeted and actual results are given. Okay, 2,500 units, 3,000 units, 11,000 hours, 66, 120 actual hours, 25,000 fixed overhead, 175, actual hours 16,000. Calculate all variances in relation to variable overheads and fixed overhead. Okay, let us calculate some. Calculate it won't take much time, so even that will. Started with let me copy the information. Let us start with the variable overhead. Variable overhead cost. The first we can take the variable overhead total cost variance. As we discussed, it's simply the actual cost, actual overhead minus the standard overhead. So what about the actual overhead? We can see that actual overhead would have given variable overhead actual 120,000. But we may take it in a more detailed way. Actual hours, there's 25,000 hours are there, and then you can, this 120,000 is paid for 25,000 hours. So it's rupees 5 per hour. So it's 25,000 hours into rupees 5 per hour. So that is how the actual overhead comes. Then how about the standard? When it comes to the standard, per unit, it takes variable overhead 8 hours. And you have 2,500 units actually. So then you are supposed to take 8 into 2,500 in the sense it's 20,000 hours would have been taken. And per hour it's paid rupees 5. I'm taking that in the variable overhead from the standard cost card. All right, then if you work this out, it's 8 into 2,500 into 5, 100,000. So if you take that, actual overhead 120, standard 100,000. So the difference is 20,000. It's kind of a what? Unfavorable, isn't it? The actual overhead is more than the standard overhead. And then you can do the expenditure variance. Expenditure variance. It's about actual overhead. Get actual overhead minus what? The standard. Sorry. Overhead absorbed, no? अभी एक कथा करें. Standard overhead. Overhead absorbed. Absorbed කියලා තමයි අපි ගත්තේ. Actual overhead එතකොට අපිට තියෙනවා 25,000 into 5 තමයි actual overhead ආවේ. Overhead absorb කරනවා කියන්නේ actual hours වලින් තමයි multiply වෙන්න ඕනේ. Standard product එකට යනවා 8 hours. Sorry. අපි standard එකට අපි pay කරන්නේ 5 ඒ වගේ පැය 25000ක් තියෙනවා. Right? I think it's correct, no? Actual one is fine. It's 25,000 hours, 25,000. And the standard rate is also the same. So therefore, when it comes to expenditure, there is no variance at all. That means expenditure variance එකක් නැහැ. Actual hours 25,000 and the standard overhead absorption rate 5. So there is no. Then how about efficiency? And everything must be attributed to the efficiency variance. That means variance එක ඇත්තටම ඇති වෙලා තියෙන efficiency එක නිසා. Standard overhead absorbed. Standard overhead absorbed තියෙනවා. ඒක අපි අයින් කරන්න ඕනේ standard overhead එක. Standard overhead absorbed අපි ගත්තා 5 into 25,000. 5 into 25,000, that is the actual hours. When it comes in the standard terms, for this 2,500 units, you should have taken this much of hours. ඒකකයකට 8යි. එහෙනම් 2500 මෙච්චරයි. 20000යි. ඒක multiply වෙන්න ඕනේ ඒකකයක price එක. This much. So it's going to be 5 into 25,000. And here we have 2,500 into 8 into 5. 100,000. Yeah, it seems that the mistake over there, what is that? What kind of difference is that? 525,000, 2,500 into, yeah. So it's no problem with the rate. You should have taken 20,000 hours and but you have ended up taking 25,000, so therefore it's unfavorable. So I think here is the mistake that has happened, no? It's 25,000 into 5 must be 125,000. It's 25,000. Okay, no problem. तर පුතා මම මෙතන ගන්න එක කරද්දි තමයි වැරද්දක් වෙලා තිබුණේ. හරිනේ. तर මෙතන තේරෙනවා අපිට variable overhead total cost variance එක 25000ක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට එතන expenditure variance එකක් නැහැ. අපි standard එකට අනුව හිතුවේ 5ක් ගෙවනවා කියලා. ඇත්තටමත් අපි ගෙවලා තියෙන්නේ 5ක්. ඒ නිසා ඒක ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. Sorry. Here it's 120,000, no? Variable overhead. What went wrong? Yeah. Actual hours 25,000. Okay. 120,000 divided by 25,000. This is where the mistake has gone. It's 4.8. Right. Got into that. මෙතන round වෙලා තමයි අවිල්ල තියෙන්නේ. Sorry for that පුතා. It's 4.8. 120, yeah, it's 20,000. And here also it's 5. Here also there's a difference. It's 4.8. It's something to do with the computer. Sorry for that. 25,000 into 4.8, 120,000. It's 5 into 25,000, 125,000. So therefore it's 5,000 difference. What kind of difference is that? It's 5,000 difference. If you look at that, it's actual. You have paid 4.5, but you expect to pay 5. So therefore it's a favorable one. So hence, yeah, the expenditure variance is there. It's 5,000. It's 5,000. And 25,000. Yes, what we have done is correct. Then we may look at this about the variable overhead. Now let's look at the fixed overhead. So if you have any questions, so please do let me know. Fixed overhead variance. So how we take that? It's about first the fixed overhead total variance. Overhead the total variance. How we are supposed to take that? It's again actual overhead. Actual overhead minus standard overhead. Actual fixed overhead, there we figure that out. It's 25,000 into 4.8, and we found the actual. Sorry, it's earlier one. It's in fact 175,000. The fixed overhead, 175,000. How you have taken that fixed overhead? It's 16,000 hours. Actual hours 16,000. 75,000 divided by 16,000. 11. 10.94, right? It's 10.94 into 16,000 hours. So that's how you would have taken the actual one. Let's try that. 10.94 into 16,000. 175,040. It's a rounding one. We can take it 175,000. Then the standard overhead, how it goes. Standard one for this, you have made 2,500 units. As per the standard, you are supposed to take 5 hours. 5 hours. So therefore, this 2,500 units can take 5, and that is the number of hours. And per hour, you are paid. You're supposed to pay ₹6, the absorption rate. So accordingly, it's 2,500 into 5 into 6. 12,000 hours into 6. I think 7,500. How many hours? 2,500 into 5. It's 12,500 hours, yes, into 6, 75,000. So accordingly, 175,000 and 75. Actual overhead is more than the standard. So therefore, it's 100,000. It's unfavorable. Like unfavorable. Right? There's a question. Is it budgeted fixed overhead? No, Bata. I think you are asking the fixed overhead, right? The standard one you have to take. This is about the fixed overhead total variance I'm taking. When you come to the expenditure one, next one, you can see that, right? Fixed overhead, expenditure variance. You take the expenditure variance. Yes, it's going to be the actual overhead minus the budgeted overhead. That's it. මෙතන බලන්න යන්න actual overhead එකයි budgeted overhead එකයි. So actual overhead එක අපි ගත්තා 10යි 7.94 දිකරා 1,16,000. එකකින් අපි ඉවත් කරන්න ඕනේ budgeted overhead period එකට අපි budget කරේ ඒකක 3000ක් ඒකකයකට 5 hours into 6. මම ඊතර තියෙනවා 3000 hours එකට 5යි 6 ගානේ ගෙවනවා. එතකොට මෙතන 1,75,000යි එන්නේ. මෙතන අපි බැලුවොත් 3000 into 5 15000යි 15000ක් 90000. එතකොට අපිට පේනවා අපි plan කරා ඒකක 3000ක් හදන්න. නමුත් අපි අවසානයේ හැදුවේ ඒකක 2000 sorry මෙතන අපි බලන expenditure එකනේ. expenditure එක අපි ඒකකයකට ගෙවන්න plan කරේ කීයක්ද? රුපියල් 6ක් අපි ගෙවන්න plan කරේ hour එකකට අපි 6ක් plan කරේ. yes rupees 6 per hour. හැබැයි අපි කීයක් ගෙවුවද ඇත්තටම 10යි 7.94ක් ගෙවලා තියෙනවා. 10යි 7.94ක් ගෙවලා. එහෙනම් අපි ගෙවුව ප්‍රමාණය වැඩි. එහෙනම් මේ දෙක අතර යම් කිසි වෙනසක් එනවා නම් ඒක unfavorable වෙන්න ඕනේ. So there's 85,000. It's a unfavorable one. It has to be a unfavorable one. මොකද අපි expenditure එක ගැන බලන්නේ. Now you take the volume variance, fixed overhead, volume variance. On volume variance එක අපි ගන්නේ අපි නවත්වපු තැනින් පටන් ගමු. budgeted overhead එකකින් අයින් කරනවා standard overhead. Budgeted overhead කීයක්ද අපිට? It's 3000 units. ඒකකයකට 5යි 6 ගාන ගෙවනවා තමයි budget එක. But in terms of standard ඒකක 2500ක් හදන්න ඒකකයකට 5යි ගෙවන්න ඕනේ 6 ගාන. So that's the situation. So here if you take that, it's 3000 into 5 into 6, 90,000. It's 2500 into 5 into 6, 75,000. Then අපිට පේනවා එතකොට වෙනසක් එනවා 90,000 minus 75,000, 15,000. It has to be unfavorable because it need to be equal to 100,000. එතකොට අපි බලමු කොහොමද එහෙම වෙන්නේ කියලා. So you have planned for 3,000 units. You have planned for 3,000 units, but eventually you made 2,500 units. So in terms, you are inefficient. So you're not using the capacity volume to a fullest. So therefore, it's unfavorable. So that's it. So if you further wish, this volume variance can be further divided into two. It's about the capacity volume variance. No? I'll just go back. Fixed overhead volume, fixed overhead capacity usage. Yeah. It's fixed overhead capacity usage. Variance can be calculated. Variance. It's about I think when it comes to capacity, it's actual. You need to consider the actual scenario, and then you need to compare that with how we take that earlier. Let us look at that. Volume variance, budgeted fixed cost minus fixed overhead absorbed. Take it. Budgeted overhead. Sorry, we have stopped now. Budgeted overhead minus the fixed overhead absorbed. the fixed overhead absorbed. Right. So if you take this budgeted overhead, it's you have planned for 3,000 units per unit 5 hours into 6. And the fixed overhead absorbed in the sense it always has to be the actual units you have to take, and the rate it was 6, and you have done 2,500. Sorry, you need to take the actual hours. Yeah, actual hours how much? The question itself may provide that actual hours 16,000. Actually, you have taken 16,000 hours. Yeah. So here it comes 3,000 into 5 into 6, 90,000. Here you can see 6 into 16,000, 96,000. So you can see that here you have budgeted for 15,000 hours. So eventually you worked for 16,000 hours. පැය 15,000කට බජට් කරේ, හැබැයි පැය 16,000ක්ම වැඩ කරා. එතකොට in that sense 6,000 you are, it's quite favorable capacity usage නේ. අපි හිතුවටත් වඩා වැඩ කරලා තියෙනවා. Then what about the efficiency? Fixed overhead capacity efficiency, no? Overhead volume efficiency, sorry. Fixed overhead volume efficiency. So how about your efficiency? So in that, it's about the fixed overhead absorbed, overhead absorbed minus standard overhead. Standard එකට අනුව ඔයාගේ performance එක කොහොමද කියලා තමයි බලන්න. Fixed overhead absorbed වැඩ කරා 6 ගාන ගෙවන්නේ overhead absorption rate එක 16,000 hours. ඒතකොට ඔයාගේ standard එක වෙන්න ඕනේ 2500ක් හදන්න නම් එකට පැය 5යි ගන්න ඕනේ. එනවා මේ වගේ පැය ප්‍රමාණයක් තමයි ගන්න ඕනේ. 5 right? 5යි එකට ඔයාට ගෙවන්නේ rate එක පැයකට how much you are paid 6 ගෙවන්නේ 6. එනවා බැලුවොත් 6 into 16,000, 96,000, 2,500 into 5, the number of hours 12,500 into 6, 75,000. You can see that there the difference comes 21,000. ඉසියක්දහක වෙනසක් එනවා. ඒතර ඔයා මේ වැඩේට ගන්න තිබුණේ පැය 12,500. හැබැයි ඔයා මේ වැඩේට ගත්තා පැය 16,000. ඒතකොට ඒ අනුව ඔයාගේ efficiency එක නැහැ. එහෙනම් මේක unfavorable. You can see that it's 26,000, 21,000 over here unfavorable, 6,000 favorable here, and that reconciles the fixed overhead volume variance. 15,000 හැදුණු විදිහ. Right? Okay, so this is how we do. So anything that you would like to get clarified? Yes, now it is the time. මම පැහැදිලි කරගන්න තියෙනවා තල අහන්න ඒක අපිට කරන්න පුළුවන්. Right, okay, then it seems that you all are fine with that. So let me upload the video recording of this as well as the sheet what I have used in working out the question, right? Okay.